Hello. Not all of you might know me, but I've been here now I guess I'm walking into the second year, working in cotton and a variety of things. And my role, sandwiched between efficacy of different insecticides and at the same time some risk management, is paying attention to our beneficials and what we can do to kind of manage for beneficials so that they work for us. So what I did today for this one is I'm going to show some data that we have from an experiment that we're working on in cover crops, but at the same time, I wanted to have this as a kind of an interactive one. So I prepared a little survey to go along with this, and I was wondering, of the group, if you could raise your hand, let me know who's a grower producer in the room. How many of those do we have? 1, 2. All right, so this is definitely more for you all, but so if you'd help me with this, I'll walk through. And I appreciate your help there. There's a gentleman in at Arizona who does some kind of a survey, interactive survey thing about every year to get an idea of what their cotton team can do for the growers and how the things that we've been doing has also affected their production and ability to produce more. So I kind of wanted to start something like that and get a feel for some of these questions. So one of the first questions on here that I'm pretty interested in, and it has been pretty relevant in the ecology of agroecosystems, and that is that the size of fields and the complexity of the environment where these fields are seems to have a positive effect on boosting natural controls and also on pollinators to help with crop production. And it kind of goes a little like this. So there's a cartoon here. So the cartoon in the upper corner here is those landscapes or farmscapes that have more components in them, trees, hedgerows, even ponds and things of those nature, those tend to hold a lot greater species diversity of potentially beneficial arthropods, nematodes, and whatever that can help with production. Whereas those that become very simple rely on a much smaller pool of species that can be beneficial in those environments. So in the questionnaire that I have, the first question is, and I can see some of this data by looking at the maps, by county, I have an idea of what is the production level by county. But what that doesn't say is the individual grower production in that county. So the question is, how much do you produce, and then what is about the size of your production unit being each field? So within there then, this is very hard in a smaller farmscape. This is something that you, a grower, can do on your own. At a very larger landscape level, it's more of a community effort. And some of these things are going on in other countries in terms of managing a landscape and so on. So one thing I noticed, and I didn't know about cotton because I'm new to it, is that I made an observation in one of our plots. We're looking at cover crops, and I saw this bee out there inside of one of the flowers. And I looked this up, and then I looked up a little more information on bees, and bees are important to cotton. From the publication that I found, bees account for maybe only 0.2% of pollination, so they're not heavily dependent on pollination. However, in a Brazilian study, having pollinators out there and providing space for those native ones could increase production as much as 12 to 17%. So they are important. And one of the patterns that they found is relating back to that complexity of the landscape is the closer that the fields were to field margins, and having field margins of native habitat provided for better habitat for bees and to promote production. Another one that I'll follow up on later is that bees seem to be important and are pretty highly valued for a lot of different production systems, including cotton. So I didn't know much about cotton and bees, but there's been a lot of bee hype lately, as you've seen, and when I found this one out in the field, I was curious, and so I thought I'd share it with you. And I found a study in Texas that came out last year that when I was doing my pollinator thing, and they found 3 pollinators that are pretty important, and actually found that in their system. So they created a system of 4 different sites where they had 4 different fields within each one of those sites. And one of their main take-homes there was that landscapes that maintained natural areas around their land where they were growing tended to have greater amounts of pollinators. So does that matter? What they found was it does matter, and they found greater pollinators when you have more of that land around there that's kind of native. And the other thing is that pollen limitation went down. So more of those flowers that opened up during the season were pollinated when there were pollinators around, which leads to more bolls, more boll production, and more cotton, from my understanding. So that's a positive thing. Now within field, the second question that goes along with this is the within field habitat management has been talked about quite a bit from my understanding, and we're working on this as well. And one of the within field habitat managements that that one can do is cover cropping. Cover cropping has a variety of different services that it can provide, and one that Philip continues to talk about, and also Taves and I are working, and he's also worked on some projects in the past as well, is that using a combination of cover cropping and tillage can reduce thrip populations considerably in the early season, which goes along with an argument in the kind of biocontrol literature on building up early season healthy communities of beneficials can lead to better crop production in the long run. So we collected some data on this as well, and we're scaling this project up. But in ours, this is 2016 data within small plots that were 20 feet by 40 feet. And what you see across here are different cover cropping treatments, and what these bars represent are the level of thrips on 5 plants. And what you see is in one where you don't have a cover crop, you tend to have much higher thrip populations than ones where you do have cover cropping. So the question on the thing that goes along with this is, do you use a cover crop, a winter cover crop? What type? What kinds of things are mixed into there? How long have you been doing that? Are the basic questions that go along with this piece. So I'm working with the USDA on a broader set of questions in fairly large fields, and in the long term I'm very interested in partnering with folks in commercial fields to look at some of these patterns. And one of the ones I'm interested in is if you look at these 2 fields here, these are 2 commercial fields, and they're very different in a number of ways. One of them is they're managed in 2 different ways. One of them is very highly, intensely managed. I have full record of everything that was sprayed across the season. In the low intensity, there's sort of a little bit of management going on, but not heavy amount of insecticide, at least, management going on. And I know there wasn't herbicide management going on because I had to go through some forests of weeds. The other thing in these 2 that you can see as differences, if you notice, there's some areas along the edge of this one, and there's fewer along this one. See, there's an area right there where these would be deemed sort of marginal areas for production. That is, it's very difficult to get anything to grow there, and when it does grow there, you don't get good yield off of it. So one of the questions I'm working with is, can we better use that for promoting beneficials in the landscape by planting things that don't need to be managed, that in the long run will actually just build up habitat for beneficials to live in and then move into the field? So the idea of managing marginal areas to promote beneficials is the idea that I'm working on. But within that, we have a grid system where we looked at how management intensity influences the sort of the longevity of the health of beneficials within these landscapes. And if the population, so this is just one indicator being spiders sampled by little pitfall traps. One indication is spiders out there on the ground. And when these are heavily managed with, I think this was over 5 insecticide applications across the season. On this first insecticide application, which was tank mixed with herbicides, if I recall, the populations plummeted, and then they never recovered the rest of the season. In the other one, which was a lot lighter, kind of infrequent, the spider populations were able to maintain. So beneficials were able to stay in there. Now, when I was out in those fields, we're talking high intensity and a lot of cotton. We're talking low intensity and also not so great a cotton. So there are trade-offs in how much management leads to healthy beneficials and also good cotton production. And I wouldn't argue against that at all. So we can make these work for us, but it definitely requires finding areas to manage habitat, and then also planning for when is the most appropriate time to utilize other tools such as chemistries to manage the pests that go in there. So there are a lot of different beneficials out in those environments. So the last little bit on the survey that goes along with this is trying to value what these beneficials, what is the value of beneficials in agricultural environments and specifically to cotton. And I have it as a question in there, and it's basically what is the value that you place per acre on beneficials. And I've pulled some numbers that are more broad, but if those couple of you that are producers, if you wouldn't mind checking a spot on there, that would be fantastic. And I'll share a few kind of global ones that I've been able to pull from the literature. From the literature, a study from 2001 to 2003, just for cotton, places pollinators for cotton at approximately worth $137 million just for lint production globally. And seed production is also quite highly valued. In Texas, the study that I mentioned that was published last summer, they claim that by boosting native areas and improving native areas around fields, one could actually boost production by as much as $103 per acre. So that's their hypothesis based on their results on pollen limitation and boosting pollinators in the landscape. So they're very highly valued, but we have to put them to work. And it has to be balanced with some of the other recommendations within our growing system. Because as you know, and as I continue to learn even about cotton, producing and producing adequately is not a simple matter. It's not just about insects. It's not just about nematodes. It's not just about maintaining the right physiology. It's also, from this view, about considering the surrounding habitat and the context which you're utilizing all these management tools. So with that, I just want to thank a number of folks. I spoke to, I work very closely with this group here, and I spoke with Dr. Mike Taves and Dr. Philip Roberts and Joe LaForce about the survey and this idea before coming today. And I also thank the Cotton Commission for continuing to fund components of building habitat through cover cropping for beneficials and through crop management. And the USDA is also helping out on this as well. So with that, I will take any questions if I still have time.